Hi, everybody. My name is Natalie Yeadon. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Impetus Digital. At Impetus Digital, we have built some of the best-in-class asynchronous and synchronous virtual collaboration and communication tools. We have worked with pharma companies from across the globe over the past 14 years to help them with everything from virtual advisory boards, online medical education, investigator meetings, and everything in between. And since the launch of our award-winning events platform, we've been helping pharma companies with large corporate events, sales training, innovation hackathons, and everything in between. But more importantly at Impetus, we really believe that everything starts with a conversation. And from these big, hairy, audacious conversations with some of the leading edge thinkers, digital provocateurs, and healthcare thought leaders, we can all work together to collectively and positively disrupt healthcare. So I'm super excited to having one of these thought leaders at the table with me today. This is actually Jonathon Carr-Brown, and he has an extremely diverse background and career. So super excited about talking about it. He's actually moved from being an actual national newspaper political editor to speech writing for Secretary of State for Health to co-founding and running NHS Choices. So he is now the chief operating officer of a company called Healthfully. This is a global self-driven care platform powered by a really smart AI symptom checker. While at NHS Choices, he was involved in introducing, commenting on NHS services. So my NHS data, shared decision-making tools, information prescriptions, NHS Life Check, and a range of other digital initiatives. So just a ton of stuff there. And he has also been involved in the development of personal health record platforms, an end-of-life care platform, and a locum recruitment platform. So lots of digital experience there. More recently, Jonathon has written about the need to create a digitally enabled pre-primary care health sector to promote self-driven care and reduce the burden on primary and emergency care globally. Welcome, Jonathon. So happy to have you on the show today.
Well, thank you very much, Nessie. It's great to be here.
I absolutely love it. So again, we were just being a bit facetious there about a very diverse career, but it really was. And I'd love to find out a little bit about how you went from being a newspaper political commentator to getting into the digital space and healthcare and where you are today. So I'd love to hear about your trajectory there.
Well, if I go back to the 14-year-old me who was desperate to be a journalist, he would think that at the age of 54, I should be editor of the Sunday Times by now. But that's, so life got in the way, basically. I got to a certain stage in my journalistic career when I realized that the type of journalism I was engaged with wasn't conducive to having a family and maintaining a marriage. So I took the decision to sort of leave, and I did a few things before that speech writing job. I started a bid writing company, but then basically because of my political background, I have some links to the Labour Party in the UK. I got asked to help write speeches for a Secretary of State called Patricia Hewitt, and that was just the most fabulous time. It's like being a kid in a candy shop being a speechwriter. I could literally speak to anyone I wanted to in the NHS, and it gave me a fantastic background to how health services work and equally don't work. And that led me to her talking about what her legacy was going to be before she left office. And she really wanted to create a service that allowed people to choose more appropriately their NHS services. And one of my colleagues at the Sunday Times, a guy called Tim Kelsey, who's gone on to do all sorts of digital stuff in Australia and America, he came up with this idea of creating this service called Choices. And we put together a team, mostly of ex-Sunday Times people. So we had a guy called Paul Newkey, who's the head of content. I was head of strategy and communications. Tim was the managing director for a while, and a really great data scientist called Robert Cleary. And we started off creating this service called NHS Choices, which allowed people to talk about the services they were getting when we gave them data about their services. And it was a great thing, but it actually wasn't what people wanted. And I learned my very first lesson about digital, and that the ideas that people come with always need to be tested with the public. And what we discovered was actually what the public needed was health information. they weren't that keen on data about how good their doctors were, because they kind of assumed that they were good enough. If they were working in NHS, they were good. And we discovered that if you told people that their hip surgeon killed one person in every 100, that actually scared them, and they didn't know how to use that data. But what they really wanted was trustworthy, authoritative health information. And that kind of set me on this path, and looking at how you get information to people at the right moment, at the right time about their health. And that's how I got into this digital world.
Wow, absolutely love it. So let's sort of start to dabble a little bit in Healthfully, and in the fact that it's really just a composite of information, health information on all sorts of conditions and issues and health concerns. But right now, as we just think about I'm not even going to use the word metaverse, the world, the digital world, everything has gone digital. And there's, quite frankly, knowledge has become free. Like everything that you'd ever wanted to know about your health is technically available. Various places like Medscape and WebMD, and there's a lot of things that people will go to the Mayo Clinic. So if that's really what the problem statement is, then why are those sites not giving people what they're looking for, which is health information?
Those sites are certainly giving people health information, and they're doing a kind of good job, but we haven't moved past that sort of encyclopedic approach, and we haven't actually gone any further than what NHS Choices started doing back in 2005, which is creating general trustworthy information about things. When we've got the ability to actually say, Natalie, we can give you very specific information about what's happening to you. We can look at your symptoms, we can look at your age, we can look at your gender, and actually we can tailor this information. So what we're talking about at Healthily is moving us to, I don't know, health information 2.0, okay? Highly personalized, highly directive, and getting you to a state where you can trust the information you've got, because you can see how it relates to you. And I think the big problem with most information at the moment is it doesn't stop people necessarily going to the next step. I think a lot of people will gather that health information, become better informed, but they're still going to end up going the same route to a primary care physician. And one of the takeaways is that we've got to sort of deal with that asymmetry of information and get people to actually say, actually, no, I've got enough information over here, I understand the information, and I can actually choose different routes. I know I need to go see a physio, okay? I know I need to go see a pharmacist. I know I need to go see a mental health worker. I don't need to go straight to the thing, because I've got enough information, I trust that information, it's personalized to me, and I can start making different decisions. And it's not about diagnosis, okay? This is about empowering people to actually make informed decisions about the routes they need and changing the pathways into healthcare. Yeah. Fantastic. Where at the moment there's just one pathway into healthcare, and that's straight into primary care.
Yeah, beautiful. No, I think I love how you framed it as being health information 2.0, because it really is that N=1, which is the much more personalized, as opposed to showing up to the Mayo Clinic online website, typing in some symptoms, and then hoping that that thing pertains to you, even though there might be perturbations or changes or anomalies associated with yourself. So let's think about the healthcare consumer's experience. They come to Healthfully. Tell us exactly what the process or the patient journey is when they approach your website.
So, and this is a work in progress. So what we're trying to do is trying to get them to come in and offer them as many ways of searching for that personalization as possible. And underpinning all of this is 7 years of building an AI engine, which is traditionally called a Symptom Checker. But that Symptom Checker is the foundation of our website. And over the next year or so, we're going to show you how that Symptom Checker can transform the way you search effectively for information. Because we'll be that search journey will be asking you, probably through a chatbot and things like that, just, okay, well, what are you looking for, Natalie, today? Can we help you? Maybe we should be looking at your symptoms first, or let's just say you want to look at diabetes. but do you want specific information about diabetes because you're 50? That means you need slightly different information to someone who's 20 and things like that. And it's creating a journey that feels really personalized and really individualistic and feels that it understands you and is sympathetic to you. Now, we're not quite there yet, but we've built the foundation, and that's what's going to be coming over the next year or so.
Absolutely love that, Jonathan. Now, that is really the core difference here, is something that's truly, and we hear this all over the place about personalized medicine, or, you know, something that's truly customized to you specifically. Tell us a little bit about how the symptom checker was made. So we always get concerned about intrinsic bias in the way algorithms are developed, and or questions about where those data or those databases came from. So is there any way, without giving away proprietary information, of how that was really pulled together over the last 7 years?
So I think the first thing to say is that when we say AI, we're actually talking about augmented intelligence rather than artificial intelligence. So very early on, we realized that if we tried to train something on medical information, we were going to create a Frankenstein's monster. Just purely because there's no data set in the world that doesn't have bias. So for instance, if you took even if you had a data set from primary care physicians that had all the symptoms in and all the diagnoses in, okay, it would be wrong 25% of the time because doctors are fallible. And also, primary care physicians are not diagnosing most of the time. They are treating on a risk-based approach. So they're looking at your symptoms, looking at your age, looking at the person who's coming into the room and saying, okay, on balance, I think you've probably got flu, okay? And I'm going to treat you on that balance of probability. And if something else happens, then I'll treat that. So there's no data set that you can train AI on. So we and most of our competitors in this area have had to create our own medical databases and effectively go in and say, right, well, what are all the symptoms that we know are associated with diabetes? And someone described it as massive Excel spreadsheets. And in one way it is. So every single condition has an Excel spreadsheet associated to it with all the possible symptoms, all the influencing factors. They've all had numerical numbers placed on it. And that's why it's taken us so long to get to where we are. And it's got a major barrier to entry of anyone coming into it, because it just has to be done manually. You have to get doctors, they have to sit down, they have to comb all the evidence bases, and they have to find the epidemiology for every condition, and you create that and you build it up. The advantage of that is it's not a black box. We know what's happening, so we know why. We can see the logic and how it's choosing the conditions that it eventually spews out, and we're in control of it as well. So if it's spewing out nonsense, we can see, okay, we need to tweak that and we need to tweak that. And that's the other sort of path we've taken. It's taken us a long time to just keep tweaking it, and it'll be a constant journey. As we have more conditions, as we have more influencing factors, as we get more data, because it's an infinitely extendable database, we'll constantly be refining it. But unlike sort of a traditional AI model, we're in complete control of it. And so anyone using it can have a very high degree of confidence that it's not going to come up with something that is unsafe.
Got it. Yes. Now, where does AI fit into that? Because obviously, as you said, an infinitely expensible database, and there's data everywhere. I mean, let's be honest. There's peer-reviewed journal articles, non-peer-reviewed. There's data everywhere, shared at conferences, what people are saying amidst themselves, electronic health records, etc. How is that kind of data being compilated and introduced into your algorithm and into this overall machine learned system?
So we're not using AI for that. We're just using humans for that. But where AI is coming into it is in our understanding of what people are putting in. So unlike some of our competitors, we use natural language programming. So you can come in, you can write anything you want, and we will understand that. So that's where we're using AI. And so we're building up a really sophisticated understanding of how people describe things, and describe their conditions and their pains and their aches and things like that. and then associating it with our medical database. So that's the clever bit, the understanding, and that ultimately is where that personalization will come in. You will be able to write anything you want and give us multiple conditions at the same time, and we will grab those conditions and start applying the Bayesian logic that we use and that all symptom checkers use to actually figure out, well, what's the likely conditions you might have.
So that sounds very novel, Jonathan, that you're not having people fill out a specific template based on the way the algorithm reads information, that there's almost like a freestyle or a free text based on the way people interpret their own health. So that's actually a really great entry point. But I was also just curious about other ways of gathering ambient biometrics. People are wearing smartwatches these days. A lot of people are using 24-hour glucose monitors and other sorts of sensors. You know, we're eventually in the future going to be having these things in our clothes, embedded in our clothes or in our software or on our keyboards. Is that data eventually going to be able to be transposed into the system as well?
Yeah, and that's the sort of long-term dream, that we end up in a situation where you trust the Healthily enough to create an account, and you start putting in those markers. Okay, not all of them would be relevant, and there's a lot of debate in our medical team about, okay, well, of an infinite number of things that you could put in, what would actually be relevant at a given time? And so some of those things would be interesting to you, but not particularly relevant to finding condition. But certainly, if you're diabetic and you can give us information about your current readings, things like that, we can plug those in over time. And that's why that infinitely extensible database is vitally important. We can just add in factors, okay? And so one of these things, so if you're I don't know, 54, diabetic, and we know what your readings are, that's going to add to the granularity of what we can tell you about the possibilities that your symptoms might be. Now, we haven't done that, but we've built it so we can add those things. And that was always in our mind. And I think what we're looking for is a world where we want it to be held within your phone. And so that opens a world of possibilities as that phone gets more sophisticated about taking data from you. And so anything you can take from your phone, and possibly other Wi-Fi devices, will be able to put into the algorithm at a certain stage. And
yeah, absolutely.
You're probably looking way down the line at a sort of almost like a personal algorithm that's sort of creates a graph of you. But my medical team will just start pulling my hair out if I start talking about things like that, because that is way down the line.
Well, you're talking about a digital avatar or a health avatar version of who you are. So lots of people are working on that right now, which is exciting. So at the end of the day, what we're really saying about Healthfully is what makes it truly different from, a WebMD or Mayo Clinic, or even, quite frankly, Dr. Google doing a search on your symptoms. The core differentiator is really the deep personalization of the data, but more importantly, this idea of a digital gatekeeper. So with all of these other systems, you still find out what's kind of going on, and then you end up going to your primary care physician. And as you know, we're talking about healthcare cost containment and the barriers associated with number of players out there and healthcare providers. So what you're suggesting is Healthily is ultimately different because it's actually introduced something of gatekeeping. So instead of going the traditional route, once you found the information on Dr. Google, and then you now go to your general practitioner, is you're saying that you can do something else and almost doing a bit of triage. Can you explain a little bit about what you do there?
Yeah, so our ambition is to create a service which is trusted enough and relied upon enough to actually give the user the confidence to take different decisions, slightly more sophisticated decisions. Now, I know from my NHS Choices Day and all the research we did that often people would read the information, but just not have enough confidence to not go into the doctor. They go to the doctor forearmed, and that's always better because it changes the conversation. But they're still going in when actually they've got a cold, yeah? But they still need the doctor to tell them, actually, you've just got a cold, yeah? Even though they've got enough information, we haven't quite tipped them over the edge to a different type of behavior. Now, this works the other way as well. So it's not only just about preventing people who don't need to go to a doctor, it's also about nudging people who do need to go to a doctor. So something is about actually saying, within our algorithm, we've got all the early warning signs of cancer and things like that. And often people will get a triage to go and see a doctor for things that they think are quite benign. But our AI our approach has said, actually, no, there's some things here, given your age and that, you should probably go be checking out now. Yeah. And so it's kind of working both ways. It's getting people to present early and not present when they don't need to present. And the tricky bit of all of this, and we're really honest, is can we create something that's trusted enough for people to actually make their own decisions based on that information? Yeah. And do that. And that's the unknown. Yeah. That's
absolutely.
Sort of behavior change. But that's the holy grail of what I think everyone in this industry is trying to do.
For sure.
Be trusted enough to actually change behavior.
Beautiful, beautifully said. So I guess the proof's in the principle. So let's actually step back for a few minutes and discuss about the crazy thing that just happened to all of us 2 years ago. Some of us are still going through it, which is the wonderful world of the COVID-19 pandemic, which, as you know, just the whole world went topsy-turvy, and we're just kind of emerging out of that funk right now. Now, there are various people that were saying, I mean, this is a great example of, as we talked about things like symptom checkers and, doing PCR testing, and do I have it? Do I not have COVID? Should I travel? All these sorts of decisions around, in some ways it's sort of a yes or no. And at the end of the day, if every single person went to a healthcare provider, we see all these huge lineups, or, what should I be doing? And should I, so there's a lot of questions around that. Tell us a little bit about how you partnered with Walmart, as an example, to manage some of this COVID-19 uncertainty.
Yeah, so we talked to Walmart, and we said, look, there's a way of you helping your customers that you haven't thought of before. And it's not just about selling drugs, it's about helping them understand what they might have. Okay. And it's moving this further down the value chain to the customer and saying, look, we're not only here to help sell you something, but we want to sell you the right thing at the right time. And we want to possibly save you from buying the wrong thing. Yeah. So one of the things we can do with our algorithm is create graphs and turn it on its head. So we can say, okay, well, this is what the condition COVID looks like. This is what the condition flu looks like. This is what the condition cold looks like. And we can combine that into a contained, what we call a condition checker. And that's what we've built for Walmart. We said, okay, let's build a condition checker for your users. And for users on Google, because part of this experiment was to understand at what point people need something like that. And what we learned was that if you put something like that on the Walmart site, then it gets used and there's a really high click-through rate. But actually the behavior is on the Walmart site, people kind of already know they're there to buy something. And what you really need to do is put it early on in Google, okay? And so we got huge use when we shoved it into the Google sphere, where people were actually confused, and they said, oh, that's the point where people want that answer. And if you think about it, what Healthily is trying to do is answer two questions. We're trying to tell you what I need to know and what I need to do. Okay, and this cold, flu, and COVID checker is a really good example of how you can do that simply at different stages of the user journey. And address different needs to the user. So we had it's a short experiment we did. We got 40,000 people through that thing, answered lots of questions, sent them to high quality content, and we sent them to high quality products and services that have been vetted and were appropriate for what they had. Yeah. And for those people who had COVID, we were able to say, no, actually, you should be getting tested, or at this stage, given your symptoms, you should go and see a doctor. Yeah, so it was a full spectrum approach, which I think offers a Walmart user a much more enriched experience and makes them feel like Walmart actually cares about them and isn't just there to sell them things on the shelf.
Yeah, beautiful. You have a similar situation with this condition checker when you partnered with Merck. Merck actually had his medication in the thyroid space. And I was just curious about how you applied that same individualized symptomology type of checker for patients in that area.
Yeah, and so this is the German Merck, who have a thyroid drug. They're in a slightly different issue because that was they have prescription drugs, and so that's highly regulated market. So what they can do in that market in terms of promoting the drug is minimal. In fact, they can't really promote the drug. But we teamed up with them to, that was about 4 years ago now, very early days. And we said, look, there's another way of doing this. You can enter this value chain at a much earlier stage, okay? Almost in an altruistic way, and say, look, there are literally hundreds of thousands of women in this world suffering from thyroid. They don't know about it. And actually all you need to do is get those people presenting earlier to doctors. And the likelihood is if you can get more of them presenting earlier, then QED, you'll probably end up selling more of your drugs, okay? And they bought this. We created a thyroid condition checker for them, and that's now been used by, I think, about 4 million people around the world, and mostly in South America, where they sort of been pushing it really hard. But that's 4 million people with a better understanding of whether they have hypo or hypothyroidism, and that's a good service, and they're very pleased with it. It's helped their reputation. The drug is never mentioned in anywhere, but it's created a different way of raising awareness and marketing for them.
Beautiful. Yeah, nicely said. And certainly as we start to think about these other very diverse situations, metabolic syndromes, cardiovascular, diabetes, all these other things, obviously the sky's the limit. Now, I was also just curious about, at the end of the day, you're going to be looking for success metrics. We've heard a lot about various types of software and devices, being considered software as medical devices and their impact on patient outcomes or other sorts of metrics. What are the success metrics associated with Healthfully?
So, I mean, a fundamental success metric is making money and keeping everyone employed. But I mean, the more altruistic one is we're trying to help 1 billion people find their health. Okay, and that 1 billion people comes from the number of people who search for health information on Google. So success for us is getting to as many people as possible, either through the website or the app. And frankly, I wanted to grow this to something that's infinitely bigger than NHS Choice as well. So I got, as managing director of NHS Choices, I grew that to 58 million unique users a month. We'd like to have many more on Healthily around the globe than that. And we want...
And eventually, Jonathan, will you be looking at metrics like reduced, is there some going to be correlation to reduced healthcare usage or number of the triaging to, specific, healthcare providers and specialties as opposed to GPs? Is that something that's sort of in your wheelhouse at some point?
So certainly we would want to do research into that area, and the sort of barrier to that is the cost. We have a hunch that we can do this, and at some point we will do field studies where we track people. But they're very difficult studies to do. I mean, what we really want to do at some point, and it's not at this point, because at this point we're very focused on being a sort of business consumer product. We will start working with healthcare authorities and things like that. But I'm afraid my learnings from the NHS is that you don't do that unless you are a serious player, because you need to have an equal balance in the relationship. And at the moment, we just want to prove our points, get good information to users, show that we can identify user intent. We want to form that relationship with pharmaceutical and health services about getting qualified users to their services. And then we can say, okay, are we actually making a difference here in the way healthcare is used? And that goes to this concept of pre-primary care. Can we actually be the enabler in a sort of pre-primary care healthcare sector?
What would be considered your ideal business model for your product, Jonathan? It sounds to me like it's a B2B to C model, where ultimately, I mean, how would you ideally like to have this position for you to grow the company?
So, I mean, ideally, we want to form alliances with health retailers and pharmaceutical companies, and basically sort of have a Spotify model where those pharmaceutical companies are actually investing in us and advertising with us and seeing us as the route to providing high quality health information to their users, and seeing us as a way of enabling them to be part of the user journey, a much more longer user journey. And that's the business model, the commercial model that's going to pay the bills. And once we've solidified that, got that working, then we can do our more altruistic things we want to do, which is make sure that we're making an impact in lower middle income countries. We've got a big presence in India at the moment, but we also want to go into Africa and places like that. And but we've got to make sure that we have the commercial foundations to do that. But ultimately, this was set up by some very altruistic investors, and they have a very altruistic view of what we can do in terms of helping people get health information for free at the point of need and at high quality.
Beautiful, lovely, well said. Really, really interesting. Absolutely love what you're doing at Healthily, and I think there's a lot of legs there and a lot of extension and opportunity in the future. So we will keep our eyes set on that. For anybody who's interested in speaking with Jonathon, speaking with him either on a partnership, a connection, just learning more, please take a look for his details in the show notes below. We're also really excited. If you were interested in this discussion, please check out impetusdigital.com. These are the kinds of conversations that we have with pharmaceutical companies and payers, patients, allied healthcare providers, and physicians in a series of asynchronous and synchronous touch points over time to discuss getting information to patients. How do you actually extend your brand? How do you learn? How do you strategize? How do you build things that are beyond the pill or beyond the obvious in your marketing and in your clinical communications and medical strategy? So those are the things. So we definitely check that out. Please like and subscribe to our channel. Check us out on YouTube or your favorite podcast area. We would love if you can leave us some feedback on iTunes as well. Thanks to all of you, and especially Jonathon, really appreciate your time today for a fantastic conversation.